a great breakfast, I'm telling you.
I love to cook for people I love.
Comes through in the cooking. We had bacon and eggs and grits.
Yeah, fried grits.
Whew. Wow, first time Barry's had grits.
Is that so?
That was pretty cool.
She was a grits virgin, and now she's no longer a virgin with grits.
Oh boy.
Right.
Well, speaking of virgins, we're going to be speaking about virgins and non-virgins. We're talking about sexuality and spirituality, and it's June the 16th, 2005. We're at Jerry and Georgianne's, and maybe I haven't in these tapes said too much of who I am, why I'm here, and the reason I'm here is that beginning in about 1995, I did a Shalom retreat, and it just changed my life. It changed my life, and I think I owe my adherence to this process and staying in this process and in this community for over 9 years now has invigorated not only my love life, my spiritual life and relational life, but also it's carried through to my business and my creative life. And I think if you were to talk to my employees, on a good day anyway, they would say that it has made it a more humane place to work. And
a loving place.
A loving place to work. And so we have our version of the principles and skills of loving up on the wall in our main office. And it's a guidepost for me every day to know why I'm going into work.
So you're actually bringing love into the workplace.
Well, that's the thought, yeah, is that the principles and skills are completely valuable in a work environment as well. Yeah. All right. This equivalent of the principles and skills of loving has been a real touchstone for us at EcoPrint. And it's infused our workplace with a more loving energy, and I think it's shown up with our customers and our suppliers, the way we serve the community and everything else. So. And
EcoPrint is your business, and what kind of business is it? What do you? Well, obviously printing.
Yeah, we do printing and mailing for a lot of charitable organizations. Actually, a lot of people that are doing, really taking right action in the world. So it's a wonderful fit.
Yeah, but what makes you different from somebody else who's doing the same thing?
Well, I mean, we're attempting to bring into our manufacturing process principles of sustainability.
Oh, so, wow!
Yeah, so really trying to create from start to finish. I mean, sustainable, I think, in a spiritual way as well as in an environmental way and other things.
You ain't one of those bloodshot-eyed environmentalists, are you?
We're tree huggers, yeah.
Yeah.
We're granola heads. Yep. Certifiable.
Out of sight. So I hear you witnessing that Shalom Mountain, your experiencing of the people and the leaders there, changed your life, and so you see the world in different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get up every morning seeing it, I think, differently than I did 10 years ago, for sure.
Out of sight.
So just to, put context to who I am, and turning to our today's subject is sexuality and spirituality, and I think we've done 3 of these interviews now, this being the 3rd, and I assume we'll put in the title Sex and Spirit or something, because if these ever get sold, clearly this will be the big seller, right? Because it has sex in the title.
Yeah, man. Sex sells.
Sex sells, and it's sort of indicative that would literally be true. Just because sex is in the title, it would be a magnet for attention and probably controversy.
My goal is that we put spirit as exciting as sex. And that increasingly the spirit becomes more and more important, so that some kind of a transformation takes place and something new bursts forth in the world. So it is my deep conviction that the overcoming of the distance between these 2 powerful forces on this plane, sex and spirit, the bringing of these together is probably the gateway into transformation and enlightenment.
So it's by holding our sexuality in abeyance for so many years, it's really compromised, you believe, our spiritual journey. It's really stunted our spiritual growth significantly.
There's no doubt about that. I think what I'd like to do is start out by saying that we are born into this world, into this plane. We are born as spirit and matter. This is an illusion that these are split, but on this plane they are split. That the struggle between these two powerful forces on this plane of matter and spirit is the central aspect of all spiritual growth and development. So what we're talking about today is not just a titillating subject. It is philosophically, theologically, sociologically, and every other logically way I can think of, is at the center of spiritual growth and development.
And you said the struggle is at the center.
The struggle, because the struggle is never over. It isn't that you say, well, you know, I've been there and done that. Because basically, a process proceeds on the basis of a paradigm of climbing a mountain. Now, there are many roads up the mountain of truth, but one has to choose a road up the mountain. And once that choice is made, one has to realize that one is ascending but not there. And so people who listen to what you and I have to say today will hear it on the level of which they are at that time in regard to their reconciling sex and spirit on this plane of life. So the first thing I want to say is that matter and spirit are at the center of this dialogue. The body is the outer manifestation of matter, and the spirit is the basic force out of which matter has manifested itself on this plane.
Matter is a manifestation of spirit.
Matter is born of spirits. A spirit is not born of matter. Matter is born of spirit, because the paradigm with which I look at the universe is that there is only one spirit. There is only one consciousness. And everything else is a manifestation of that consciousness in the world. So the eruption of this struggle of the soul for me came actually quite late in life. I was 55 years old, and I was in a theologically philosophical transition in my life, and I began to look at the issue of sex and spirit as being an uncompleted journey in my own soul. I was an intellectual who continue to work at, read at, think about the union of sex and spirit. So you can say I was a smart-ass philosophical being fooling around with very important volatile material. Mm-hmm. But it was going on up here.
Now, why did you have a clue that this was central to your journey at that time? What were the clues?
Well, in the first place, I had done a lot of work in primal scream therapy, getting in touch with my own feeling world and getting in touch with my own twilight zone, and then getting in touch with what is even deeper than the twilight zone in regard to how my life was being run. My life was shattered in 1961 when my wife drowned, and it was 7 years later before I was able to get in touch through primal scream work with my anger at her for dying. And so I had to, in some deep sense, rebuild the basic paradigm with which I viewed the universe and how the universe is run and how spiritual development takes place in a human being. And I became convinced through the practicing of yoga and other disciplines that somehow or other these two were separate. I had one way of looking at things from my brain, and my body was somewhere else. So I, by this time, had been deeply involved with primal scream work and with Esalen and with a lot of other group techniques, and I had a sexual engagement with a very beautiful woman whom I had never met before, and she led me across a river. I somehow had allowed to slip away a lot of the basic rules and regulations of life, and I surrendered to an experience, and then the experience changed everything. I saw that I had very important work to do from the point of integrity, from the point of view of autonomy, from the point of view of whether I was willing to risk a world that I knew very little about.
I want to pick up on two words or phrases that I've heard you say. The first was the feeling world, that the conduit was the feeling world, and the second was surrender. Now, neither of those words strike me as something you learn at a course at Yale Theological Seminary.
This is true. This is why I think a certain amount of the group techniques that were developed in the human potential movement open up the path for us to get in touch with a part of us that is hidden away. That a lot of our fear, anger, and our pain that manifests as hostility and anxiety and hostility, anxiety, and depression. All of them are in the twilight.
Now, what do you mean by the twilight?
By the twilight means that it is accessible. It is hidden, but is accessible. It has very much to do with the early stages of the unconscious. And I think as we get into the twilight zone, then we also the open door to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the unconscious world where most of us is. Most of us is there.
So it seems as though there was, probably for many, many years, this split between sexuality and spirituality within the church, and part of this journey into the twilight part of ourselves is an attempt to heal this split and find integration. And this is where the life is, you believe, in our spiritual lives and in our sexual lives. One without the other tends to be pretty lifeless.
We cannot live in this world without being acculturated. And the culture in which all of us in the West have been born have been very powerfully influenced by the church, especially in the early years and most powerful in the medieval period. And there the body matter is inferior to spirit, and is the cause of evil in the world. So the body and evil, theologically, by the church was interpreted as a negative force that had to be not only condemned but also controlled by the culture. So this is built in to the culture in which we are born. Now we're all acculturated. We cannot live without being acculturated, and then we spend the rest of our life unacculturating ourselves and trying to break free from the baloney, that we have been given. So the shattering in my life produced the possibility for me at last to deal with sexuality in an uncultural way. That is, in a way other than the perspective of the dominant culture. And this was a very big, very, very big thing. So now I've come to see that sex is the most powerful force moving in the human psyche. It is life longing for itself. And it, because of the perspective of the culture in regard to the nature of sex as something that is in some sense evil and needs to be constantly controlled by all kinds of laws, to break out of that is a major step in the spiritual path. Now, this is it. Life longing for itself.
Life longing for itself.
Right. So as soon as one is willing to say, okay, I'm willing to divest myself of what the culture has taught me, and I am going to go meet myself.
I'm going to come home.
I'm coming home.
I'm coming home to myself.
I'm going to meet myself. I'm going to allow myself to manifest as life longing for itself, as what the basic sexual power is. And so I went this route. I have had all my life a longing to know how to love God. And I have found through my disciplines a way of bringing together sex and spirit, and therefore God. Therefore the experience of the living God. So this subject that we're talking about now, and that I hope we can, move into explore, is, I believe, the pearl of great price.
Well, what's occurring to me as we're sitting here talking about this, it feels so fundamental, and so much of our life energy, and in fact the energy of the universe, of the all, is informed by a polarity. There's the plus and the minus. There's gravitational pull, and there's the repulsion of centrifugal action. There is masculine and feminine. There is light and dark. but the whole of the universe. This is really fundamental to the essence of things. Is that to reflect what you believe, or?
Well, you and I, we worked over this issue of dualism and monism, and on this plane, I think we have to always see that dualism reigns. Just like Jesus said, the devil is the ruler of this world. Well, the devil is not in the sense of the Persian devil that Christianity adopted, but the Lord of matter. The devil, as the Lord of matter, is the ruler of this plane. And we cannot get away with that. Everything is dualistic on this plane. But this is not the plane of eternity. This is just a flat plane in which our soul is taking its journey, but it is not. It is the illusory world, or it is Maya, as the Indian theologians say. But that the plane of eternity, the plane of God, is not this flat plane of dualism, but it is the plane of unity and of oneness. And so this is the basic longing of sexuality in the human scene, to return to oneness, to reconcile opposites, and to experience the unity of all things. And I say that human sexuality is I would like to say but I'll watch out. I would like to say that it is a major doorway into the presence of God. Now, why does this not happen for a lot of people? It happens because the instrument that they are using is not functioning at the level it was intended to function at. Our bodies are composed of 7 chakras, 7 major energy centers. You can, in a sense, say that they are the spark plugs, like in a car. And these centers need to be working together. But most people do not know how to bring these 7 chakras together so that they operate without all the spark plugs working.
So a lot of people are having sex running on only a couple cylinders, maybe.
Well, people think sex.
Right.
So that here is the chakra, the third eye, which is also the thinking chakra, and it is the center of spiritual secrets. People make love from their brain, so that, or they make love from their first and second chakra. But that means that they're only partly present when they make love. So that to make love and to meet God making love, to be with God, to make love to God, all 7 chakras need to be humming, spinning along. And so the whole excitement of the spiritual journey is to learn how to make love with 7 chakras spinning, and all of a sudden find out you're making love to God.
So I imagine the reverse is also true. If we try to make our connection to merge with God just from the upper chakras, this also ends up being a halfway sort of exercise.
This tape is worth that statement. I think it's a brilliant statement on your part, and shows where you are yourself, because thinking about loving God is thinking about loving God. It's not loving God You're not making love to God because you think fine thoughts about God, or you're not loving God because you say, I accept the Apostles' Creed, you know, word for word. Or I believe all the doctrines of the church. That doesn't mean that you are making love with God. And our job is, our task in our spiritual journey is to find the incredible ecstasy of making love with God. And you cannot make love with God without bringing matter and spirit together.
So, I'll poke you a little bit here. So, there are those who look at this sort of, you know, framework of looking at sexuality and spirituality and say, well, that's fine and good, but really what's happening here is this is a great justification for free love, for self-indulgence. What do you say to folks like that? Because there's certainly a lot of commentary, I think, can center around that. And I think at the Mountain, where sexuality is quite open, even people who come in to that community and see the way sexuality is present there say this is so much BS.
Well, I'll tell you what. First place, I would say I'm hot to trot for lust. I really believe in lust as a great, wonderful, juicy energy. And I think that, what is lust? I mean, lust is, wow. I think to have a great lust for life, to have a great lust for sexual intercourse, to have a great lust for good food, to have a lust for a good conversation. So I think we need to take some of the words that have all this bad reputation and give them a kind of a new, you know,
new spin.
A new spin.
Yeah.
So that's about where I am with that. I think that when you take a spiritual journey, then you have to say, I am reacculturating myself. I am taking my journey, and I'm willing to take the risk of the journey.
Right.
The journey becomes the thing.
What I love about your approach to this, and I want to note, is that whenever we have a conversation like this, it comes back to, it doesn't begin with, now, this is what I did, and you need to do this. That's not what I've ever heard.
Exactly. I think all we can do on this spiritual journey, on the life through this plane, we can wave at each other. I can say, you know, I say, hi, Laura, I see you there. How you doing? And you tell me about what you're doing, and I say, wow. And then I tell you what I'm doing. I say, wow. That's about what we can do. We can witness to what we are doing and be vulnerable about sharing it. It is if, you know, if the boundaries are not so high on the person you're telling it to. We can witness to our own trip. That's about how we can help each other. I don't think I can tell you how to live your life.
So there's something about the way the church has, or not all churches, but in many churches, the what's gotten across is this is a moral issue. This is right, this is wrong, and there's some way in which this isn't of service to the spiritual journey.
No, but you see, we go back always to the idea of the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is interested in controlling behavior. Spirituality is interested in setting the soul free to journey. And I always want to say that established religion many times births very spiritual people, and it also deadens them and kills the life force. So that it's a very iffy business. But I myself go to church every Sunday that I'm in town, And I am a part of what I call the transcendent community. Everybody who is in that little church on Sunday morning, they are opening themselves to the transcendent. And so that's the community that I join, and I think they are people just like me, and they're stuck people just like me, and if I told them a lot of the people in the church where I am with sex and spirit, you know, they would think I would a funny fella, at least a funny, at least
Could
a
be
funny.
more serious than that, actually.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I guess I want to also say that there is very little progress in the spiritual life without discipline. That we need to practice disciplines that bring together the body and the spirit. And I think of no discipline better than the ancient discipline of yoga, because it is highly sophisticated in its theory and in its praxis. So
I also want to say, and I think just to go back a little bit, because I think the disciplines have been really important for me. But there's part of this opening up the setting free of the soul. You know, spirituality being the liberation of the soul, the opening of possibility that is, I mean, terrifying, frankly. This is opening up a whole realm of risk, and this is, I mean, it's what kept me from journeying, starting on a journey for a lot of years.
that's right.
It's the unknown, and the rules and the should-bes and have-tos are very comforting.
And you wanted to be acceptable in the culture,
Absolutely.
because now you're no longer acceptable. You know,
Many places, that's
you are
probably
now
true.
moving away.
Yeah.
You're out on the edge where the freakies are. You know, you're getting more freaky all the time.
Well, the more I come
And,
here, I can tell you that's true.
Well, the point of the matter is that I think that there was no man who has ever lived who was more in favor of freaks than Jesus was.
Right.
So it's a good, you know, you lose one company and you join another company. It's very interesting. You thought this was the right one,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you find another one, and then you find out you're not alone over there. You will find out you're not alone, that there are other people, you know, who are asking the same questions and have the same excitement about self-discovery and learning about yourself and releasing yourself from fear, you know, and all of a sudden a whole new world opens up. It's a little scary because in certain quarters you're no longer acceptable and you have to protect yourself.
Well, I think the other thing that I have seen in community, and I think community is something we could talk a bit more about because it's so important to find fellow travelers on this journey. But the other thing that I think is challenging is sexuality, and the opening to sexuality provides a whole host of challenges. I mean, there's rejection, and there's hurt. There's lots of complications. You know, depending on how it unfolds for someone, but I think so many people get burned, or the feeling of being burned by the vulnerability that is opened up here, that that may be one of the reasons it's so shut down. It is high voltage stuff, isn't it? This is the essence of
Yeah,
libido, the life force. So it makes sense, but it's not an easy thing.
It's the most powerful force in life, and its misuse is the cause of maybe all the misery of the world.
Whoa.
The misuse of this incredible sacred power. And I've been working on these issues for a long time, and I'm just a baby in this realm. I believe that the potential of the human mind is almost impossible to fathom. And we use only a very small part of what mind is, not only the human brain, but the mind, the universal mind, and the ways in which genius works and the way in which insight comes are incredibly huge, exciting questions. But you see, we cannot explore this world as long as we're hung by our fear and by our hostility and by our anxiety and by our depression. It's very hard. So we have to find the way of bringing together the body and the spirit so that we can soar in the heavens, and so that the spirit can really fly free. I mean, we're only here for a short time. Let's say I'm 86, but it seems like a very short time, and I'll soon be gone. Don't make any difference, because once you have found how to make love to God, you have already overcome the dichotomy between matter and spirit, and you have returned to the source.
Death is a non-issue.
Death is a non-issue. So you're able to say, "Oh, death, where is thy sting? Oh, death, where is thy victory?" Because there is no victory for death anymore, because there is only life, and there's only one consciousness. So, bringing together sex and spirit is a direct route of merging with God. And is it dangerous? You bet. All separation from the norm in culture is dangerous, and you may end up at the bottom of the heap, but that don't make any difference, because you have become aware that you were born as love, as joy, and as peace. That is your essence. And when you are dead, you will be love, joy, and peace. That is who you basically are. So bringing together sex and spirit is finally to wake up to the fact of who you are, that you are divine, that you are a divine being, and that you are not only with God, but you have merged with God and have become God. That's big talk.
That's big talk.
Yeah.
It strikes me that for those of us who've been to Shalom Mountain and do work at Shalom Mountain, that the work there is infused, it was infused from the very beginning with, you made a decision that the visioning of this work had to be grounded in this healing of this split section spirit. Right. And I really believe that that lives on today, 30 years.
That's right. I think that we had, first of all, Shalom retreats are built on the basis of an attempt of unifying body and spirit. And many people are touched and touched for the first time in their life in a Shalom retreat. That is, that the body with all of the electric magnetism and mysticism is awakened through the touch of another human being that you hadn't met before.
You know, I want to tell you a quick story about the second time I was ever at Shalom Mountain. Was to a men's retreat there, and I walked in the room, and Lawrence was leading this retreat, and you know, I had felt very touch deprived in my life in a way, particularly by other men, to just have that sort of flesh hunger of being hugged by a man. And when I walked into that room, people were sitting around the Shalom room as they do, hanging out against the mattresses, and I just looked around the room, and some men were sitting by themselves, and some men were sitting kind of close to other men, and some men had their arms around the the man next to them, and I looked at this, and part of me said, oh my God, how am I going to be in this group? And there was another part of me that said, oh my God, I'm home. I have longed for this all my life, where there could be this sort of open regard and affection and touching with men. So there is something that just took me down the chute,
Right.
into myself, and you know, I've never looked back. But I think there is something about the mountain that allows the safety for these sort of high risk, what can be, even a hug can be a very high risk thing
yeah,
for a lot of
some
us
people.
men, particularly, I think, but for women too. There's something about the way the mountain has evolved from this original vision to hold this, and very importantly, I think, not to give in to the desire when someone is hurting, or when someone is legitimately, you know, really been injured, to set up rules. There's been a fierceness, both I think in your leadership and Joy and Lawrence's leadership, a fierceness to say, well, we're not going to put this in a box. We're not going to make it so safe that nothing happens here.
Safety, nothing happens in safety. That's right.
Yeah.
It happens in the risking, and I think you have just given, I think, a beautiful witness of the power of risk and the excitement of risk and the awareness of danger all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always the issue of danger, always the call back to behave and be a good boy and, you know, fit into this nice little box. But the journey cannot be taken in a box.
Right.
The journey cannot be taken in a box. It has to be taken in the wide open terrain. And this kind of talk, it's the dangerous talk, because it's not safe.
Right.
And everybody's journey is different. And everybody taps into this kind of an issue at a different place. And nobody can tell another person how to live their life.
So here's where individual responsibility, authority, autonomy come into play. That this, I think you could look at all this and say, oh, well, this is all about free love and just, you know, do your own thing. But really, coming back, I think, to some of the disciplines you've spoken about, this is a sacred process of coming home to oneself and then getting hold of what is dear to us individually. Who are we? What are our boundaries?
And everybody's got to tap into it where they are. They cannot tap in it where somebody else is. They have to tap in it at the level where they are, and they have to decide whether they're going to be a conforming journeyer who lets a religion or whatever group may say this is how you are supposed to behave, rather than allowing deep within one's own soul to find one's own bliss and to follow it, and to be able to say, here I stand, I can do no other. This is where this is me, and I'm standing here, and I can't do anything else, and I'm willing to receive whatever it costs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here because this is where I need to be, and this is where I'm going. Now, it's dangerous, but I often say that the primary myth at the heart of Christian teaching is Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And Pilgrim, the story begins with Pilgrim going on his journey and his wife and his kids screaming after him. That's how it starts. Of course, you know, this book was written in prison. He wrote it in prison. But it is still the Christian central myth about spiritual journey that begins with a man going out and finding something more important than any institution. That's the soul journey. It's a dangerous journey, and it's delicious.
It's where the life is.
That's where the life force is. And I very much like this term, life longing after itself. And once one commits, as you have committed, obviously committed, it's very exciting. It's very, very exciting, and life can't be dull. And all of a sudden work is transformed, and relationships are transformed. And you have been willing to let go of the past because there's no use wallowing in guilt, and that's what a lot of past is about. And you are not primarily living in the future because that's where the anxiety is about life. Anxiety is future oriented. And so you all of a sudden wake up into a very wonderful world of now, of living now, with every breath, to take in prana, to take in the excitement of life through your breath. You begin to know that there's no such thing as work anymore, that you're just playing. You're just having one hell of a good time all the time.
It's sort of it's living orgasmically. I mean, you know,
right.
An orgasm is probably for many of us, the most present we can possibly be.
I'll tell you, in my disciplines, I've found something better than an orgasm.
I think everyone will want to hear this, please.
You don't. It's the moment before orgasm, and then hold it. Hold it, hold it, hold it. All of a sudden you realize that you are on a plane, and you can train your brain to live on that frequency, and that then keep ratcheting it up, because there's no limit to the amount of ecstasy that we can know. There's no limit to it. It is limitless. The limitless ecstasy is the energy of God. It is a thoughtless state in which there is no past and there is no future and there is only now. And learning how to live there, that's big. That's big.
And you believe we were built for this?
I believe that's who we are. We are the essence of God. We are the essence of universal consciousness. We are divine. We are divine, and all the shit that we work around, it can fall off. We don't need to carry it around on our shoulders. We can let it go and live like the birds. And we can say, wow, a bird sitting up there in the tree and he's singing, wow, come over to my nest, right? I mean, this is what basically he's singing. And the frog that you heard last night when you were going to sleep, this frog says, come over to my house.
I am longing to know you.
Right.
I am longing to know you. I am longing to know myself.
I mean, if the birds and the bees and everything else is going on, that's all they're working, that's all they're doing, is this life longing for itself, just this fantastic energy. And instead of sitting, with aches and pains and all this kind of stuff, just live in that world. And some people think crazy, but I think as long as you see the two planes, you have to constantly be going like this. In other words, you're up at this plane, and then you're down on this land, and you're over here and over there, but you're always free to be there. And this transforms that. So that the work world, the sleep world, the eating world, everything in life becomes transformed as soon as this transformation takes place. Soon as this contradiction is overcome and becomes a living force, everything has changed. Everything.
There are a few dozen people out there now that are leading Shalom retreats, which works with this energy at its core, I think. What words do you have for them?
Same word I have for everything. Be real. Be yourself. Cut out the bullshit, you know. Cut out pretense and be real. And find your own power and be present. Be present. Just be there. Yeah. Be there. I think the idea of hierarchy in leadership is no longer fit for the world of swim and bury. It's no longer the world for people who are alert to the transformation of consciousness.
So it sounds like you're saying to a lot of us leaders, go on your own journey, number one.
If you're not on your own journey, don't mess with being a Shalom leader. I mean, if you're not on your own journey, you're not excited about it, and you're carrying a big shitload on your back, don't be a leader of Shalom.
Now, what I do not hear you saying is make sure you have it all together before you start to
No, nobody has it together. That's the point. I mean, I think that's the point of wisdom, that there isn't anybody who has it all together.
I'm relieved.
I mean, all we've got is our story. We've got ourselves, we've got our autonomy, we've got our own integrity, and the excitement of our journey. That's what we got. And then there are a few psychological tricks, you know, little stuff, you know, little techniques that we teach other people. But basically, the core of leadership is authenticity, and it is autonomy, and it is integrity. And if those are missing in leadership, people can smell it like a cat can smell a mouse in a room.
Yeah.
A cat can smell a mouse in a room, and human beings can smell non-authenticity in a leader. And that's it. That's what I have to say to them. It's not a lot, but it's something.
Well, and it sounds like us leaders need to feel, you know, we need to feel free to bring our own hunger to know ourselves.
That's part of who you are.
Yeah,
that's part of who you are. But also, they have to see, you know, that the emperor has no clothes on too. You know, I mean, as soon as you don't have any clothes on, and they see that, you know. I mean, I'm talking about psychological, spiritual clothes. People will go as deep as the autonomy and the integrity of the leader. That's how far they will go, but because that's the basis of trust.
So this is part of the. I mean, this sounds like a really basic principle for the Shalom retreat process, and I think something that makes it a more powerful process. There's lots of, as you say, lots of paths up the mountain of awareness and enlightenment, and one reason that the Shalom process is so powerful is because of this. So it feels as though the next generations of leaders, I mean, I think as I've viewed the leadership process unfolding, the piece around sexuality is often one of the most difficult. And this is where community and our joining forces to nourish ourselves feels so important.
In transactional analysis, one of the stages is Nicky Sob. You know it? Nicky Sob. It means now I got you, son of a bitch. And it's very easy in the realm of sexuality. As soon as fear emerges, somebody else is wrong. As soon as fear emerges, somebody else is to blame and somebody else is wrong. And so this is a very big issue when it comes to leadership. That is, that the leader has to be in touch with her or his own fear and be honest about it and not allow it to hijack the process. Right. And it's a very slippery slope. Right. It's a very so that I think anybody who tries to lead Shalom retreats has to be, one, if they're going to be really helpful, it is their own journey that they are offering up to the, that's where the teaching comes, right?
And the more depth and breadth there is to that presence, the more it's going to open up space for
Shalom Mountain is a process, but it is not a magical something, you know, that you work like a toothbrush, you know, electric toothbrush. I mean, it really is very deeply involved with the leader and with the emergence of trust on the part of the people who have come there to be switched on. Yeah. Because I think using, that's an old-fashioned term now, but what happens is turn on. Turn on to what? Turn on to one's own life process, to one's own energy, and to turn on to God.
Mm-hmm. What is the role, why is community so important in providing a container for this to happen? It's almost like the community at a Shalom retreat is the crucible that allow people to go into this furnace and go into the twilight areas of their life and find the juice. But without community, I don't see it happening anywhere.
Well, see, there is, in some sense, a deep longing in the human soul for merging, for coming together. I mean, the word coming, for example, is a very interesting concept. I mean, nobody ever sits you down and tells you, you know, sexually what it means to come, right? Why use such terminology? But basically, what are we saying when we call the other person to come? We're calling them to join us, you know, to join us where we are in our energy, so that we may become one. So we may become, we are able to transcend the ordinary consciousness and move into another world. But I want to go back to the issue of trust and community. Very early in our life, from the birth on, we are constantly involved with the longing for unity and the betrayal of community. The constant reaching out and longing and finding that longing abridged. And so a massive amount of distrust is built into the whole system. So when one finds a community, when one finds community, one finds trust again. To trust the beings who are out there, that they are not only like us, but they are us. And the shalom process is in a way a rebuilding of the trust component in the lives of the people who come, and a willingness to risk it. But a community is basically the temple into which we go to surrender. That's it. To surrender. And to be able to let go of ego.
To begin to trust the unitive impulse.
To trust that there is something more. I mean, to open up to just, sometimes it's just a little peek that people get, you know, that there is something more out there.
Yeah. Your hair does look very neat all of a sudden.
Yeah. Are we ready now?
Sure.
I hear that my hair was not quite right. I do so want to look nice.
Well, I think that the use of the mousse in your beard has really been an improvement.
Yes, well, I spend a lot of time on my fingernails, and you know, I want my hair, everything to be just right. So I'm so happy she fixed it up.
Well, we have an excellent makeup person here.
Right.
And she really is something.
Well, I have a thing. I have a thing about it, you know. So
there aren't many mountain men that care about getting their cuticles done.
Yeah, I know, but I have found out that if you're going to make it in the world, you got to conform. You got to look right. You just sew, and you got to wear the right clothes. And I've always tried to do that.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
You'll be in GQ next month.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about community, and we were talking about how this power of community that is hard to put into words, but that allows us to enter a space at Shalom Mountain and probably many other places where community is present to hold safety and to invite us back to this joyful place. Maybe is our birthright, and it's been there all the time, but there have been all these blocks and these shackles that we can somehow release in being witnessed by community, and the magic of that.
Well, it seems to me that the business of growing up, we get stuck. For example, when you look at a little 3-year-old kid, say, "Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me," right? I mean, I'm the center of the universe. Look at me, look at me. So that's one aspect of us, and then there's this other aspect of us that wants the safety of not being out there. I mean, of being able to get lost in community. And then there is the power that comes from being with some other people who are having the same perspective that you got. And it's a mixed bag. In other words, it's not, you say, well, community, that's not, there is no such thing that is all this or that, because everything is always this and that. And so there is something about community where it is possible to surrender this part of us that says, look at me, I'm the greatest, I'm the center of the universe, and move into the realm which says, I belong somewhere, and I have somebody else, somebody can give something to me. I mean, I can't just give something to somebody else, but somebody can give something to me also. And there's some kind of wonderful transaction that's going on here. And I can lose myself here also. But all of these things are positives, and every one of them has a negative hooked up to it. So community is a risk. It's one more it's one more risk in the journey, but I'll tell you what, there are some powerful healing forces in community where forgiveness takes place, and where sexuality can be said a yes to, and where dreams can be shared. I don't mean dreams, but visions of life and what I long for and where I'm going. All of these things are for community. They all have a sexual and they all have a spirit component. Sex and spirit are always there. And the reason why many people do not experience deep community is because of the fear of sex. And they have the fear of sex because they don't have their own boundaries about it. And they want sex and they fear sex, and when it raises its head, then they say, and they get scared enough, then they blame somebody else for it. Instead of saying, wow, this is something that's going on in me, right? But it's somebody else's fault that I'm having now to face this fact of sex in my life.
It's always interesting to me how this conversation about sexuality always comes back to how deeply it informs every aspect of our life.
Exactly.
And there is in this culture and probably in this world this deep longing for community and connection. And there's this deep fear, as you say. And again, what you're saying is this is rooted in, at least in part, and maybe at its core, in the dishonoring or the sense of danger around sexuality.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, I can go into a locker room at the club I work out at, and I think the couple hundred times I've been in there, I can count on one hand the number of times there have been words spoken between two men in the locker room. Now, my sense is that that's a deeply rooted fear.
Sure.
Of sexuality, and there's something that we're really losing here, isn't there? With disconnect.
People who have fear in this realm lack boundaries, and the best way in which to live in community as a sexual being is to know one's own boundary. Right. Is to know, a lot of times when I was leading Shalom retreats, let us say a man comes on to a woman sexually. I'm really hot, for you. And then one of the responses that the woman can make is, this guy's doing me wrong. He's seeing me as a thing and as a piece of meat and so on. That's one response that comes from the fear that this woman does not have an adequate boundary. Because all she needs to say to this guy, who is just like she is, she's sexually, she says, I'm highly complimented about how you're feeling, but that's not where I am. Total disarming of the situation. And that's the end of it. Nobody has to be blamed, nobody has to be put down, nobody has to be reported on. All you got to say is that it's just, I have a boundary here.
So when fear is present, it may be because there is the fear of not being able to hold our own
Exactly, boundaries. To hold the boundary.
And when we feel iffy about our own boundaries, this is where the fear can turn into
blame,
the righteousness and the blame.
Sure.
Right.
And the culture is rife with this. The reason we have such huge problems with sexuality in the culture is this incredible fear, and an unwillingness to really say, I am matter and I am spirit. I am matter and I am body and I am spirit. I have to pay attention to my body, and I have to pay attention to my spirit and figure out how these two are related to each other, and I have to take my journey.
So is this a place where a lot of the social emphasis on there being victims, is it not in service to us?
Yeah. No, I think it's. I'll tell you what, it's dangerous for me to say this because this is such a volatile issue.
It is.
But I think the issue of abuse is a hugely mishandled thing in the culture.
Of sexual abuse.
Exactly. And I think I think the whole idea of trying to correct error is a waste of time. And because I think most of the counseling that is done in the realm of the correction of error is digging a deeper and deeper and deeper hole, and getting deeper, more and more stuck on the victim psychology.
So it's
which leads to depression, huh?
It's disempowering rather than empowering.
It is absolutely disempowering, and I think rather we need to focus on goal. What is get people who are seeing themselves as victims to instead begin to focus that same kind of energy on goal. What is the goal of their life? What do they want? And because there is absolutely no power in being a victim. There's a lot of negative power, but there's no positive power in being a victim.
But should there be action taken against perpetrators?
I think that those who live by the sword die by the sword.
So there are consequences.
And I believe that there are serious consequences to all behavior, but I believe that the punitive model in regard to sexual misbehavior produces practically nothing. I think there are some people who are psychologically so damaged that they have to be separated from society. But I believe that before people are separated from society, every possible redemptive force needs to come into play. And I think that that punishment produces only more hatred and more. But I want to say very firmly, I believe that there are perpetrators in the sexual realm who are dangerous and who need to be separated from society.
But I'm thinking, I couldn't quote it, but these sound reminiscent of the words of Jesus. Every effort should be made.
Every effort. When Jesus said turn the other cheek, he was using a metaphor not for the lower cheeks but for the higher cheeks, and to be able to be willing to over and over again give the benefit of the doubt. One of my favorite definitions of love is giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. And I believe that everybody wants to be loved. There's not anybody who doesn't want to be loved. And I believe that people respond to love. And sometimes there are some people who need to be disciplined in love. But I think we should never do anything without love. I think that is the basic call.
Right. Well, maybe we're about done.
I think we are. We have not ended in a crescendo, but we have ended up with having said something to each other. And I think we have not been sitting here as people who are saying, dribbling, these pearls from my beard, but rather we're saying this is how one person has lived his life, and how one person who is now 86 years old sees the scene. He doesn't say, this is the answer, but he's saying this has been my trip. That's what I've been talking about, is my trip. And I guess one of the reasons you wanted to talk, you wanted to hear a little bit more about my trip. Everybody's trip is very fascinating, and a book could be written about anybody's trip. So This is my trip about sex and spirit, at least some aspects.
Maybe there'll be a chapter 2. We're not sure yet. But, I think it's also a call to those of us who have witnessed your journey, that it is a call to integrity and authenticity for us, and also to hold dear these principles at the mountain, and know that there will be difficult times, and in our individual work with people there will be difficult times, but that we can trust the process.
Trust the process and trust your own journey. Trust your own journey as it unfolds.
Good words, Jerry. Thank you.
All
Thanks
right.
for being with us.